Hey guys, today is another perfume video, and today we're going to be talking about a very interesting little gem that is an absolute classic. So I'm expecting actually many people will be very familiar with it. This is not a new and up-and-coming scent, but it is a scent that I got in a duo, and I've already reviewed the peony version, but this is Stella Mccartney's Stella. This perfume was initially put out in 2003 actually, so this is quite an old fragrance. It's from the 2000s, and that era is really not my favorite in terms of perfumery. Unfortunately, it's probably my least favorite era ever to have existed in perfumery. You know how there's the same thing to do with fashion. I feel the same about fashion and films and music as well as perfumery. For some reason, 2000s is really not my favorite. I think there was a lot of very plastic, sweet, cute, and generally tanned Britney Spears-esque thing going on that is really does not jive with me. So 2000s is really my least favorite decade for perfume making, as well as fashion and some other things, but perfume making specifically because today we're really talking about perfume. Stella defined the era. It was a perfume that has pretty much described all florals that were popular in that decade. And Stella is a decent fragrance. I think one of the better ones of its time, and you know, definitely worthy of production at the time. It was sort of swimming in that sea of sugary sweetness, which was quite unfortunate, if I should say so myself. But Stella is interesting because it does not have a lot of sugariness in it. It is a pretty straightforward floral, in fact. Most of what you smell when you get into sniffing Stella is going to be a pretty meaty, a pretty fluffy rose with a decent amount of a dose of peony. So those are really the two flowers that this fragrance smells like. There's a bit of zest in the background created by what they say is mandarin, but it's a generic citrus. You know, it's like you take all the citruses, you mix them up, and you have this slight undertone of cleaner in here. Some citruses have this little bit of a tanginess to it, or a little bit of that bitterness that makes it a little bit more believable. Here you have the, you know, window cleaner citrus in the background. This is not the main scent that is in here, but it is a very edited citrus. It's not a realistic citrus, and it doesn't really make you feel like you're smelling a citrus plant or a citrus fruit. It makes you feel like you're smelling a cleaning product with a lot of florals on top of it. And the beautiful thing about this fragrance is the fact that it is so gosh darn wearable. It's a very wearable scent, and I think that is probably what is attributable to the success of this fragrance is attributable to the fact that this is so generic smelling. There's a lot of very general, pleasant florality to it, which I think is what sells this fragrance very well. This is a good seller actually, and still it is. Probably one of the better selling fragrances in the whole lineup for Stella McCartney. And it's not surprising to me. Why? Because I think this is an easy pick for somebody who's looking for a generic floral, and that's pretty much what it gives you. The only interesting thing about this concoction, which apparently has amber and some woods in it, which are very difficult to find, and here it's really the three ingredients that I've described. It's some rose, it's some peony, it's some citrus. And it's very likable in that way, because this is the skeleton, the backbone of any truly floral fragrance, a very classic pyramid to build on in terms of scent. They did find decent molecules to represent all three, except I would say citrus is a bit of a slacker in here, I have to say, but the rose and the peony are believable and quite meaty. They're very juicy, juicy flowers. There is a sense of wetness to it as well because of the way that these molecules are constructed. And I like that because it does remind you a bit of there is a flair of being in a garden full of garden flowers for sure. And I would say that the closest this is in spirit, I would say it's pretty close to Elizabeth and James Nirvana White. I think these fragrances speak to the same audience. So if you like this one, go check out the Nirvana White. You'll probably like it. If you like the Nirvana White, check out the Stella. Stella is girlier, because Nirvana White makes a little bit of an attempt to be different. There's a little bit more of a woodiness and freshness to it. So it's a little bit more in line, a little bit more modern, I would say, because, well, it is a later release, obviously. This one is an older release, and it's much more girly, much more in line with the whole, as I mentioned before, Britney Spears-esque definition of 2000s. There's a little bit of that in here, although not too much, which I'm grateful for, because otherwise it just makes me a little ill inside. Although I did like Britney Spears, so nothing to do with her, just what she stands for and represents, a bit of plastic life. So this has a little bit of that flavor to it, but really not significant. And no, I mean, I don't mean it smells like plastic. I mean, there's a bit of extra simplicity that isn't like minimalist, constructivist, interesting, intellectual simplicity. It's just simple. It's a simple scent. What is interesting about it, though, is the fact that the rose has a slight amount of dustiness to it. There's a little bit of dust there. It's not a powder, it's a dustiness, a little bit of attic, and I love that about a fragrance. So I think this is really that little bit of dusty mustiness is the saving grace of this fragrance. Makes me feel like there's musk in there, but according to the manufacturer, there isn't. But it makes just that little bit more interesting and wearable. So if you like generic florals, I think Stella is just for you. It's perfect for somebody who likes fairly simple flower-based fragrances, pretty much devoid of any other dimension. If you do like that, then Stella is wonderful. It's not poorly constructed. It is quite a well-constructed fragrance, I can attest to that, and it wears fairly well. However, if you are somebody who likes experiencing a fragrance that is maybe a little bit more interesting or a little bit more intricate or has some creative flair to it, or that not everybody has, then Stella, I think, is going to be a fail, because you will quickly realize that it is a very generic scent. Part of it is because it was so gosh darn popular in its day. It was a huge seller in early 2000s to mid 2000s. That really made it very replicable, meaning that many other fragrance houses came out with scents that were so super similar to this that it lost its identity. I think in 2003, this was a much more interesting release than what it is today, because modern fragrances had really picked up on mixing in a little bit masculinity into the scents and playing with gender identity. And even if you're not into that, even if you're into a very feminine portion of perfume spectrum, which I really love, you know, playing with textures, modern perfumery really got very far when it comes to playing with tastes and textures, and how you experience fragrance. So I think Stella's a little bit behind times when it comes to that. It's a little bit too literal, a little bit too straightforward, while not smelling natural. To me, a little bit on the boring side, but it really, like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And I agree that if this genre of fragrances is your jam, then Stella's probably going to have to be in your collection, simply because it is such a classic that you would want to have it in your collection. So I do recommend you test it out. For me, however, this is not going to be a buy of a full bottle worthy sort of purchase. I don't really care to waste my shelf space on this one. But I do understand who it's meant for, and I do understand why people do like it. So do check it out if you like the simple floral fragrances, and if you like, say, Nirvana White from Elizabeth and James, I think you will enjoy this one as well. And leave me down below what you think of this fragrance. Also, what do you think of the reformulation in 2014? I did feel like it lost a bit of its dustiness. The interest that I had in this fragrance got a little bit lost, because I do feel, although they denied, the formula has changed, I think, the way I remember the fragrance. I could be wrong again, but do leave what you think of it. I'm always curious to find out. That's it for today, guys. See you later and have a good day. Bye-bye.